U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an order to levy 25% tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico. Tariffs of 10% are to be imposed on China. Duty on Canadian oil will be slightly lower at 10%. Trump cited what he said was Canada and Mexico's failure to halt illegal immigration and drug trafficking into the United States. Tariffs will take effect on Tuesday and will remain until Trump determines sufficient measures have been taken by Mexico and Canada. Both Canada and Mexico have said that they will impose retaliatory tariffs on American goods. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says her country will retaliate with tariffs and other measures of its own. She said the economy minister would, quote, implement Plan B to defend Mexico's interests. President Sheinbaum also hit back at Washington's accusations that her government had an alliance with drug trafficking gangs, describing it as slander. She said the U.S. government could address the problem of fentanyl consumption in the country, but had not done so yet. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said his country will set its own tariffs on imports of billions of dollars of U.S. goods at a rate of 25%. Speaking earlier, Trudeau warned that tariffs would have an economic impact on Americans and appealed for cooperation with Canada.
This is a choice that, yes, will harm Canadians, but beyond that, it will have real consequences for you, the American people. As I've said before, if President Trump wants to usher in a new golden age for the United States, the better path is to partner with Canada, not to punish us.
Let's speak now to Toronto-based political commentator Sean Mallen. So Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has just announced Canada will impose counter tariffs on $155 billion of U.S. goods. Do you think this was a strong enough response?
Well, we're going to see. They've tried to make it as targeted as possible, targeting at products that are particularly produced in Republican states. Think orange juice from Florida, think bourbon from Kentucky, for example. And already we've heard from some provinces that they're going to be, for example, pulling American booze off the shelves, so it can't be sold. We've heard from the Premier of the province of Nova Scotia on the East Coast that tolls on American commercial vehicles will be doubled as they head into Canada as well. So they've tried to target these in a way that they hope will cause the most political discomfort for the Americans. But to be sure, the American tariffs on their own are going to be causing significant disruption to the American economy, particularly with the auto industry, because the auto industry, Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, is highly integrated, and particularly between Canada and the U.S. going back decades. Any single vehicle, particularly for General Motors, passes back and forth across the border several times before it's finally completed. And there's talk of layoffs and perhaps even plant shutdowns on both sides of the border because of this. So this whole package on the American side and the Canadian side is going to be highly disruptive. And there's concern in Canada that the American tariffs could induce a rather sharp recession, depending on how long they last, whether this thing can be settled sometime in the near future.
So given that we're looking at painful economic realities that could result from these tariffs and the fact that the tariffs don't come into effect until Tuesday, do you think there's still room for negotiations on both sides?
The Canadians certainly hope so, but in Prime Minister Trudeau's question and answer period with reporters, it was revealed that he hasn't actually talked to Donald Trump since the inauguration. In other words, the President of the United States hasn't been accepting the calls from one of his largest trading partners. Its most important trading partner, many would argue. So there have been efforts all along. The senior ministers from the Canadian government were in Washington this past week talking with their counterparts. Prime Minister Trudeau himself went down to Mar-a-Lago before the inauguration to try to exert some influence on Mr. Trump as well, and even announced more than $1 billion in new measures to tighten the border up, because Mr. Trump's stated reason for these tariffs is to try to stop the flow of fentanyl, to stop the flow of illegal migrants coming across from Canada. Although Prime Minister Trudeau emphasized the hard fact that less than 1% of the fentanyl imported into the United States, brought into the United States, comes from Canada. Less than 1% of the undocumented immigrants coming in from Canada. So Canada, says we are claiming, is not really the problem, but that seems to be falling on deaf ears with Mr. Trump.
And let's stay with Prime Minister Trudeau for a second. He's on his way out. It's election season in Canada. Do you think he still has the political capital to carry out a painful trade war with his southern neighbor?
Well, Canada is a very tricky position politically because, as you pointed out, he has announced his resignation. His Liberal Party is in the process of choosing a new leader who will be crowned sometime early in March. Parliament is not sitting at the moment. He's in a minority situation, and the opposition wants to bring him down and cause an election because the Liberals are far behind. But for these initial measures, at least, there appears to be broad all-party support. All the provincial premiers seem to be in support of it. And the opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre of the Conservatives, who is thought to be the next prime minister, signaled tonight in a social media post that Canada should be responding in kind to the American tariffs. So for the short run, at least for these initial responses, he appears to have the support of all parties. But Canada's political future, of course, remains uncertain, with a new prime minister coming by early March and likely to be followed shortly after that by an election, which it seems the opposition is poised to win.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. That was Sean Mallen, a political commentator from Toronto. Thank you very much for your analysis.